Hello and welcome to Breakthroughs with Bree, where we are discussing all the topics that create extraordinary breakthroughs in our personal and spiritual development journeys. I'm Bree, otherwise known as Healing with Bree, and I'm a spiritual coach and Akashic Records channelers who helps sensitives and intuitives connect more deeply with their hearts, intuition, and souls, and teaches people how to process and alchemize the fears and beliefs that hold them back from living in their authenticity and purpose. You're in the right place if you like to hear about spirituality, psychology, healing, consciousness, manifestation, developing your spiritual and intuitive gifts, and living from your heart and soul instead of from your fears and ego. I hope you enjoy this episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Breakthroughs with Bree. I'm really excited about today's episode. We're going to be talking about, is that thing that you're doing to yourself, the voice inside your head, is it self-awareness or is it self-criticism? What? Whoa, Bree, you're really trying to get into it? Yeah, I am. I love this topic. I talk about it so often with my coaching clients when we're trying to figure out, are we living life from ego and fear, or are we living from our intuition and soul and heart center? We really got to grapple with this whole, am I just being critical of myself? Am I just shaming myself? Am I just blaming myself? Am I being too hard on myself? Like, we've really got to confront that version of ourselves because they've showed up as a part of ourselves that's trying to protect us and help us, but really they kind of weigh us down and they block us, and we got to realize how and why they're doing that in order for us to swap that out for something else that still gets us good outcomes, but not at the cost of like punishing and really harming ourselves and like weighing ourselves down. I saw this quote on TikTok the other day, and I'm sure it came from somewhere else, but it's where I saw it. And it said, if you think that you're self-aware, but the only things that you can list about yourself are things that are bad, that it's not self-awareness, it's self-criticism. That hit me in my gut. I said, oh, who's been following me around my home? Right? And I'm partially joking about this because this is something that I've done a lot of work to improve on. Definitely not perfect at, but it has been an area of growth for me in a big way, which is why I feel so excited to like break this down a little bit. True self-awareness is to be able to see the truth of who you are in your entirety. Right? And honestly, that kind of feels like the point of whatever this healing work is, or like if people talk about like ascension or, whatever, it's like, can I see the truth and the wholeness of who I am and really accept that? Here's my perspective on that. From where I'm at this point in my healing journey. I give full permission for this to change or for parts of this to be wrong. Does it matter? This is my perspective right now. The truth of who and what we are is our source. We're literally like a boop little piece of God energy that was put here on this earth and was assigned a little human body and a little human identity. Look at how cute we are, right? But we're literally source God, divine energy, getting to learn things, experience things through this 3D human world, right? Now, here's what's also true. Who we are in this identity is like a part of our expression and a part of our purpose. We don't want to bypass the human stuff just to be the spiritual, because if we really wanted that, we wouldn't have incarnated as a human. If all we wanted to be able to be was just our like God energy, untainted, like we would not have incarnated, right? So part of our choice to be here is like we want to kind of wrestle around down here in the human world, right? So we are source energy, and we have this whole like human meat suit, like we have this whole human identity, and we have very human tendencies and things that we do. We've had a lot of experiences that have taught us things. We have relationships and connections and way we understand ourselves in the world. And these all kind of like build up part of who we are and how we experience the world. Now, what we are, I truly believe, is that source divine energy through this human experience, but we are also human. We're just human, right? Imperfections and all. Now, when we have a little bit of like a self-critical orientation, if that's our first instinct as a way to relate to ourselves, we can name a million things that aren't perfect, aren't great, aren't good enough, that we could do better, that we don't like. But look, let me tell you, when I've dived into more soul connection, when I do channeling work, when I like have all of these wonderful experiences that feel deeply true and feel like, yeah, this is the soul stuff, the good outweighs the bad in an insane proportion. Okay, like the amount of goodness that is here, that is available always, that we're bringing through tenfold, like exponentially bigger than any of those bad things that you could list. And if you don't feel that way about yourself, you don't see yourself clearly. You don't. And that's okay, because we're human. We got to learn, right? But it's not true awareness for what you are. Here's another thing. If you know that there's a lot of good, but you see these kind of human things that aren't perfect or aren't always in alignment or kind of heavy or kind of painful as bad, or as like taking away from or like blocking you from like the goodness in your heart or the goodness of your soul, you are also not seeing yourself accurately. You're also not having true self-awareness, self-acceptance, and self-love. You're not. Because what feels very true for me and from what the guides, record keepers, all these kinds of things have shared with me is that being able to see all of it and love it and see that none of it threatens what you are. It doesn't. It's okay that it's there. It's all right. The fact that you might struggle with a habit that doesn't feel that healthy, or like with insecurity, or that sometimes you snap at your loved ones, or that whatever your thing is, right? That you're like so critical of yourself about. Right, that you think is like the reason why you're not good enough, or that threatens your ability to be healed, or your most aligned or authentic self, like however you're thinking of that, like it's okay. It's just a part of the whole thing. It's a part of ourselves that we can accept into the fold, period. It's not threatening anything, right? So again, being able to be like self-aware is to see the big picture, accept the big picture, and then navigate as you see fit, consciously, mindfully, once you see the big picture. Self-criticism is mostly where people are, and we like to put it under this like big pretty bow of self-awareness. Oh, I'm just self-aware. Oh, I'm just self-aware, because we're so terrified of this idea that somebody's gonna like criticize us and we didn't see it about ourselves, and then we're flooded with shame and guilt and whatever, and we're desperately trying to avoid that. I could think of all the bad things before you could ever name them about me, like in that whole pattern, right? Which guilty also, a past version of myself, but that's not really self-awareness, and that's also not fair to ourselves. That's not a fair or truthful perception of ourselves. It's not a loving perception of ourselves. Imagine if you had a loved one and all you could ever tell anybody, or all you could ever tell them, was every single thing that they did wrong and never anything they did right. Never looking at the entirety of their goodness, never seeing that the core of them is absolutely well-intentioned and pure and wonderful. Like if all you ever really saw, oh, that's blocking you. Oh, that's not good. Oh, what is wrong with you? Oh, like if that's the way that you genuinely thought about somebody that was supposedly a loved one, do you think that would be very loving to them? Nope. Do you think that they would feel safe and regulated being around you? Nope. Do you feel like they would feel acceptance? Nope. Do you think that they would be opened up to feel joy or to be able to be authentic around you? Nope. So how can our soul part of ourselves feel safe, feel loved, feel like they can be authentic and expressed and come through us if we are relating to ourselves with that energy? Woof. They can't. That's the moral of the story. They can't. And this is why it's really important to kind of shift the way that we look even at the pattern of self-criticism, at the pattern of self-blame and self-shame, right? Being able to see it in its entirety for what it is, what it's trying to accomplish, and other ways that we can accomplish it, I think can be really powerful for us to start to shift this and implement a new way of looking at ourselves and moving through the world. So let's talk about this. This is one of my favorite things to talk about. Sometimes the way I say it is like the ego strategy versus the soul strategy. If we're really trying to align with that soul-led place and that soul-led life, and understanding the ego strategies, their functions, so that we can still meet the need that that ego strategy is trying to get, but again, in a way that feels more authentic and is not fear-based, which inherently ego trauma-based stuff is fear-based. So this strategy of shaming, blaming, self-criticizing, judging, whatever, what might this look like? This is probably going to look like a lot of comparing yourself to other people and why can't you be as good? What is wrong with you that you can't do it the same as them? A lot of that kind of stuff. A lot of judgment of things as good or bad. For yourself, this might even be for other people. Like you might have this like, oh, I just get the ick. And it's not even that you have a strong preference, but it's a preference also with a judgment of those things as good or bad. Like what is wrong with them? Oh my God, they're so cringe. Like, oh my God, they're so bad. Why are they so stupid? Like, oh, I don't even like saying those things. Honestly, it gives me a stomachache, but like, it's that kind of energy towards yourself and towards other people, right? Shame, blame. These are other symptoms of kind of being in this like really intensely critical shame, blame cycle, like ego pattern. Again, like as soon as you do something that's not the ideal thing that you want to do, you immediately start talking really poorly about yourself, really mean, really bad. Like, what is wrong with you? Like, why are you such a mess up? you're so this, insert really negative descriptor or superlative, right? Blaming is kind of in the same category, especially when we're talking about it being back to ourselves. Like you attributing why things going wrong is always because of you, especially if it's just inherently who you are, or because you are not good enough in some way, then therefore that is why something has happened. The blame, right? This can also happen with other people. Like sometimes when we can't just like stomach the feeling of something, we can't be in acceptance and therefore we can't grieve it. We come up with reasons to blame other people. This also comes in with some controlling behaviors, because when it's somebody else's fault, if we can just control that circumstance or those people, then we can still avoid the feeling. It's a whole thing. But blame can be another symptom of this kind of critical, judgmental, shame, blame strategy. Guides, what are some other ways that this might show up for the listeners? Yeah, like really harsh expectations. They gave me a great download on this the other day. Like expectations that we set ourselves are literally imaginary. Like they're imaginary. Like for 80% of any expectation we have in our life, nobody's actually giving them to us. Like we are self-imposing the carrot that we're just running after constantly. They literally don't exist. They're arbitrary, right? But something in our mind has told us, no, but this is the way it has to be done. And usually the reason why is because we're trying to avoid a bad thing happening, or we're trying to get a good experience. And our ego mind likes to work with conditions. It knows how to get us something that we want when there's conditions. So it says, meet this condition, and that makes us feel safe that we will avoid bad thing and get good things. So we come up with these, again, arbitrary, like imaginary expectations and give them to ourselves. And they're self-imposed stress. As a download. You're literally creating stress for yourself for no reason. Like there's no reason to set this thing and create this pressure for yourself. Like you don't actually have to do that, I should say. Of course there's a reason, but you don't have to be doing that. Like life can be stressful enough. There can be plenty of things that come along that force us to use our regulation techniques and like our grounding techniques to like kind of come back to center after something stressful has happened. I mean, even just doing new things and growing in itself is a stressful experience technically, right? So like, why do we need to add more stress to the plate by like putting an expectation, especially ones that are unrealistic, just to make us feel bad about ourselves or to make us feel pressure? Like we don't have to do that. You know what I'm saying? So especially for all of you who are like really trying to reduce stress in your lives or trying to manage stress, you're probably also contributing to it by setting crazy and unrealistic expectations for yourself. Again, there's a function to them. You think that's the best way to create what you want, avoid fears that you don't know really how to process and deal with, but that is not the only way to get those good outcomes. And in fact, it's creating more of an intense, uncomfortable outcome on the way. What are other symptoms of this sort of like self-critical shame, blame strategy or pattern that people use, guides? What would be another symptom of this? Yeah, they're saying there's so many other symptoms. Like if you get caught in procrastination cycles, if you get caught in like some freeze responses, if you have ever thought like, oh, I just need somebody to hold me accountable, like I just need a deadline, like all of these are kind of like symptoms of this same energy. I'll talk, of course, a little bit more about this, but these are all signs that you might be leveraging this pattern of self-criticism or shame or blame as a way to get something that you want, and your ego mind, your trauma patterns, thinking that this is just the best way to do it. Let's break that part down. And this is the really juicy part that's always been really fun to talk about with my clients when we're in sessions. As always, a lot of these things start in early life and in childhood. So essentially, if the best way that your caregivers or parents knew how to motivate you, hold you accountable, or to create some sort of change, especially in behavior, if the only tool they had to do that was punishment, was criticism, or like shaming you, then you've really taken on that same strategy and just applied it to yourself. For example, if there is a expectation that a parent gives a child of like, you're doing this behavior, but I need you to be doing this behavior, right? And they just tell the kid the expectation and then they say, okay, do it, right? And let's just say the kid does not do it. They struggle being able to do that. And then the parent comes and yells at them, what's wrong with you? Why aren't you doing this? Like you're trying to be disrespectful, like, and yells and screams. Maybe that's part of it. Maybe they don't even yell and scream, but they do shame and blame. And the kid gets more dysregulated. They're like, oh my gosh, there's something wrong with me. Maybe then there's punishment because this kid still hasn't managed to get from point A to point B of where they started, an expectation parent gave. And the whole thing is a mess. Maybe the kid kind of figures it out. Maybe they don't. But that was the strategy that the parent used to get the kid from point A to point B. Here's what kids and the vulnerable parts inside of us actually need. Sometimes it can be as easy as, I'm here, oh my gosh, I have a realization, I want to get to point B, I want to create this change, I want something to be different. And we already have the skills, we already have the capacity to get there, but it was just a matter of like, where am I trying to go? And as soon as you realize it, you're like, yes, let's go, and you get there. Right? That's an example of it going well, already being within your capacity, etc. If it is a situation, if your destination where you want to go is someplace that you've never been before, if it's something you don't have skills for, you don't have knowledge for, or if it's such an intense change or growth according to what your nervous system knows, then you need support and co-regulation to move through that experience. You need comfort. You need somebody holding your hand. Are we still good? Are we still good? It feels very shaky in order to go from point A to point B. That is for every single human. Our physiology is made, especially for children, right? So what they really needed in that situation was maybe expectation is set, kid doesn't do it, parent comes down and says, hey, why haven't you done that yet? They get curious. And the kid says, oh, I forgot. I got distracted. Okay. Do you want to try again? Yeah, okay, let me try right now. Okay, maybe they're able to do it. Or maybe they figure out that it's a thing of them trying to like remind themselves of things that they need to do when they get distracted. And they say, okay, why don't we try and help you learn some tools, or we do some things to support you to help you be able to remember things when you get a little bit distracted, because this is important, right? Maybe you figure out that that's the thing. When you get down, you get curious. You don't assume that the child is doing it to be defiant or because they are deficient, or because they want to disobey you, because that's never the case. Are you kidding me, kids? In that innocence, all they want to do is meet your expectations and be loved by you and be connected with you. They would literally do anything that they could. So if they're not doing it, it's because they can't or they don't know how. And really, if they can't, it's simply because they don't know how or they need support. Shift. So if that is the case, if that's the assumption, we can look again at this example of a kid not doing something that they were told to do. And we can say, oh, I know you really want to do it because of course you want to. Maybe you don't understand why this is something important we need to do. Maybe you're not clear on exactly what needs to happen, or maybe it's one of those things where you need support on how to get there. So let me get down on the level. Let me be curious. What's going on? Okay, let me try and figure out where there's a gap. How can I help you? How can I support you? Is it co-regulation and encouragement and support and comfort that you need? Is it actual learnings of some sort, like to be taught something? Is it more structure or support on like the way to get there? Like what is it that you need to help get from point A to point B? As soon as you do that with them, oh my gosh, of course they're going to be able to do it. Of course they get there. And that is the level of care and compassion that our inner self needs when we're trying to move through change and it's difficult. That is an alternative strategy to create change, growth, accountability towards new things. Now, again, what we've learned from our parents is that if you just tell us we're bad enough, or if you create enough fear, somehow, some way we create some sort of motivation to get there. Even if we're incredibly dysregulated, even if we got to lie, cheat, and steal on the way there, we'll get there because we're so afraid. Create enough fear, create enough shame, create enough blame, and somehow we'll figure it out. That's all we've ever been taught. Those are the only circumstances where we've learned to get from point A to point B if it didn't like naturally come. So again, if that is the environment where you were taught to create motivation, change, and accountability, then you then apply that to yourself. And what I described about what a child might actually need is the approach, is the alternative, the sole kind of alternative here of how you can approach things with yourself, with your inner child, you could say, to still create the same outcome and not dysregulate your body and block you off from the very part of yourself that you're trying to connect to and express. Right? Meeting it with compassion, with gentleness, with curiosity, with open-mindedness. These are all sort of attributes of that soul energy. And when we meet what's happening, what we're feeling, what we're struggling with that energy, things open up. They release, they move. We have less resistance. We have less suffering. We have less struggle. We have less despair around those things. Sometimes it's still hard, of course, but it's actually easier when we aren't so hard on ourselves. Let's do an example to kind of illustrate this. I had a client who was really wanting to change her routine. That was a big part of her goals. There had been a time in her life where she was like waking up and meditating, or maybe she was eating healthier, or maybe exercising more, and she really liked how she felt then. And there had been some years that have passed where she hadn't been doing that, having a little bit of like a glass of wine at night or something like that to like, you know, take the edge off and to just decompress after a long day, not maybe eating great food, not waking up early, just being so so stressed out. And then now she wanted to do things with her life and her time and things she wanted to create and kind of wanted to show up in her life a little bit different. And she really felt like this change in her routine would help her feel better and be able to do those things with more ease. Now, when we started talking about what was going on and what aspects were happening in her routine, like the way that she was speaking about herself and what was happening was so harsh. And that's not something we're judging in itself. It's just something that we create awareness around. And I would reflect back to her, like, do you kind of hear how you talk about yourself in this? Like, oh, I just can't get it together and I should be doing this and I just keep doing this bad thing to myself all the time. I'm like, gosh, like that's pretty harsh. Like, that's pretty mean. You know, she's like, yeah, no, I'm like really hard on myself. I'm like, okay, like let's back this up, because the way that you're looking at what's happening, first of all, is a judgment that it's all bad, right? That this, like these coping mechanisms that you've picked up, this routine that you've picked up that you've labeled as bad and unhealthy is altogether bad. And if you continue to choose it, and if you've been having a hard time breaking the habit, that must mean that you're choosing something bad for yourself. Wrong. We got to correct that first thing, right? Like, we are never trying to do something that harms us. And I really, really need you to hear this. If you are in a healing journey at all, if you're trying to create any positive change in your life, it is so important that you hear this and that you shift the way of looking at this in your mind. You are never, ever trying to do something to hurt yourself, ever. No part of you in your brain, I talk about parts work. No, never trying to harm you or do bad. Never. If you're like, Brie, but like there's been some times I've done some shady stuff. Yeah, we can say that there are things that we've done that we're not proud of, that have not created positive circumstances, but the reason why we do them is not because we are bad, not because we have bad intentions. It's not. It's because it is functional or adaptable in some way, and that behavior, that strategy, thought that it was protecting us from something that was more painful or more dangerous to us, period. Every single time. It felt like it was helping us in some way. What we were choosing was the lesser of two evils, so to say, right? Every single time. You are never doing anything because you are inherently bad or flawed. And this is something we have to reframe to shift from this self-critical, judging, shaming energy into that soul perspective and that true self-awareness and self-love, right? Even if we come back at that child example, does the parent really think that the kid would have a bad intention? Like, do you believe that your kid is anything other than pure-hearted trying to do good in the world? Or do you really think that human nature is that sometimes people are just bad and just have bad intentions, right? Like, and the kids absorb that. They learn to understand themselves literally from their parents. So then the kid thinks, oh, there just must be parts of me that are somehow bad and I got to manage those and not do those and only align with the good things. Like, no, that's not how it works. It's not. Coming back again to the true self-awareness, we are source energy. In our purest state, all we want to do is good. We want to be joyful. We want to be loving. We want to be kind, right? And anything else that deviates from that is a pattern or strategy that we have picked up that basically thinks that it's giving us some sort of safety. It's helping us get something that we feel like we need. It's trying to help us in some way. It's adaptable. It's functional in some way. It is not with the intention of badness at its core. It's not. And we have to look and see ourselves accurately to release this self-hate and self-punishment. We have to. This is one of the biggest shifts that you can make in your self-healing and self-awareness journey that's going to change the game. Okay? So your core is good. Core of you is good. Let's come back to this example now that I got off my soapbox. So let's look at what she was doing and why she was doing it then. We had a whole conversation about this. Okay, if what she was doing wasn't inherently bad, then why was she doing it? Like, lens the next question, curiosity, right? And then we get to have a whole discussion where there is information to be learned to actually answer that question. Okay, if I don't assume that it's because I'm flawed or something's wrong with me or I'm not trying enough or I don't want it enough, if that is not the answer as to why I'm not doing this thing that I want to do, then what would be the answer? Yeah, oh my gosh, that just opened up the doors to so much other options, other ways of looking at it to come in. Just asking that question, brilliant. Then we're able to learn about things like nervous system regulation, about coping strategies, right? About the way that our physiology works when we're exhausted, when we're stressed, when we're overstimulated. And things like eating quote unquote unhealthy food is actually a really effective way at bringing us out of extreme dysregulation. Believe it or not, the like really intense fat levels or sodium levels sometimes too are one way of trying to address stuff that's happening with the adrenals. The fat is diverting energy into your stomach because that's one of the hardest things to break down, and in a way grounding the energy fields through that experience of trying to digest it. Like there is a lot of functional stuff that's coming from those things, or even having a glass of wine, or if you're, somebody that imbibes in a little gardening, you know what I'm saying? Then even those things are like really extreme ways of trying to curb intense dysregulation that's happening in the body. The alcohol being a depressant, or even the gardening being something that feels like it finally mellows out this extreme state of stress in the body that the body doesn't have any other way to manage. It's genius. It's brilliant. It's adaptive, right? All of those things that you're doing, you're not doing them because you're bad or devious in some way. It's because it is serving some sort of function for your safety according to your ego mind, to your well-being, to your balance according to your ego mind and your body with the best information it has so far. Now, when we finally took off the table that it was because she was inherently lazy or didn't want it enough, we were able to ask questions, we were able to realize and observe these things. And then it became a matter of how can we address the dysregulation? How can we address the overstimulation? Because it's really natural that when we are so dysregulated, we don't have capacity to be introducing new things. The body and the mind doesn't want change to happen when it thinks that we're barely surviving, right? That's the way that our body's built. We have to like bring it in. We have to lower the levels of stress and dysregulation for it to feel like we even have the space or energy to start being more flexible to try new things. Right? So then it becomes, okay, how can we start to manage some of these things in a realistic way in her life? So it does feel like at the end of the day, she has capacity to maybe order a different kind of food, or maybe cook for herself, or, do something other than, have a glass of wine or garden and watch reality TV, where like it actually feels like she wants to do some of that other stuff because she has a little bit of energy, or because she's not so stressed out, right? Like that became the focus instead of, why aren't you motivated enough? Instead of, let's add some more shame and blame and judgment and criticism on top of this. Let's add some ways to punish you or something, or, make somebody else hold you accountable and then you do it. Like, no. Instead of doing that, which a lot of coaches and people in the world's 3D human approaches are going to look like that. But the soul says, no, let's unburden you, because when you are unburdened, you naturally want to fly. Of course you do. And if you're not flying, it's because you're burdened in some way. So how can we apply that perspective to wherever you're feeling kind of frustrated with yourself? Maybe just start with creating awareness for all of the different ways that we do things like, oh, I should do this, I have to do this, I need to do this, which are all different versions of shame and expectation language, by the way. And the switch for that is, what do I want to do? What is it that I just want to do? Instead of, oh, I should get up and meditate and I should get up and do Pilates. What do I want to do? The soul speaks in the language of want and desire and joy and inspiration. And the ego, when it's in a really fearful place, speaks in the language of expectations and pressure and shame and fear. Like truly. So when we change our language around that, and when we start to create awareness for when we're putting all this pressure and when we're being really nasty to ourselves, like we can start to see all the different times where we were trying to create change, but we were just using the wrong strategy. An ineffective strategy. I mean, effective to the point that it's been functional for us so far. But when we want an even more effective strategy, aka a soul strategy, where there's a lot less resistance, there's a lot less dysregulation, aka there's a lot less suffering, we got to change it up a little bit, right? So even her being able to say like, okay, it's not about like I should do XYZ in the morning, because frankly, if I'm not doing it, it's maybe because I need more rest or because I'm feeling pressure and then it stresses me out and all of a sudden I'm dysregulated, right? Like what would just be nice? Like what do I want to do? Maybe I want to get better sleep and I don't want to like make my whole morning really intense. Maybe I actually really like slow mornings and that helps me be more regulated during the day. Maybe actually what I want to do is create little breaks in my day where I can decompress a little bit. So at the end of the day, I don't feel so freaking crazy and overloaded. Or maybe when I'm like, oh, I should do a Pilates, but what I really want to do is a little dance workout, or I want to go for a walk outside, or I actually want to just stretch because my body needs softness today. Or maybe you say, I should do Pilates, and then you say, no, it's not that I should, I actually really want to do Pilates today, right? Like even that swap out out of that should, need to, have to for want can be a gut check for where our motivation is really coming from and what strategy that we're using to create motivation to move towards change. P.S. I don't know if you can hear, guys, my dog is like growling in his sleep down here. He's having a dream. It's so cute. If you can't hear it, then you'll just have to take my word for it. So let's wrap this up. You are inherently good. When you are unburdened with some of these misunderstandings about who you are or what you need to do to get from point A to point B, your soul soars. You naturally pick things that are good for you. You naturally do things that are joyful. You are naturally creative. You are naturally loving. You are naturally compassionate. Like all of those things that really feel good and that we aspire to naturally happen when you have unburdened yourself to be able to do so. Maybe you haven't learned that to be true because you've been so burdened by the stressors and pressure and just like the things of life. And I hear you. I get that. That's real for many, 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 many people. But just because you haven't got to see that when you finally have space and safety, that you soar, that your soul is really so pure and wonderful, doesn't mean it's not true. If you have any trust in me, or if maybe what I say resonates to you, I say with 1,000,000% certainty in my bones, like with my whole heart and my whole chest, your core of who you are is good. It's enough. It's divine. It's perfect. It's more than enough. Right? And any idea that you have that that's not true is a misunderstanding. It's misconstrued. It's a myth. It's a lie. And it will sort of taint everything that you do from that place. Even healing work, even spiritual work then becomes an act of perfectionism, trying to fix the things that are bad with you, instead of seeing the truth of how good you are and learning how to embrace and heal and give a little TLC to all parts of you. Learning how to let that soul, that goodness in you take the lead, even when you have other parts of you that maybe are holding some pain or holding some mistruths, right? Even self-healing then becomes self-punishment, because you're punishing yourself for what you perceive to be bad. And then you fight against it. You fight against these parts. And even from an energetic physics perspective, what you fight against, you energize that equal and opposite reaction, right? Like when you push against something, it pushes back. Like literally you do that with these parts of yourself and they get bigger, and then the whole shadow work thing. And it's just like a whole thing, right? Even healing and self-improvement and self-awareness really just becomes self-punishment, a way to try to motivate yourself to be better, or try to hold yourself accountable to not be bad, because that's just would be the worst thing in the world if you're bad. It would create danger or unsafety or like whatever these things that are like stored in our subconscious mind about it. So like really considering opening yourself up to change your own self-perception about the fact that you are good. You are good. You are pure. You are wonderful. You are enough at your core. And that is never the problem. Take it off the table. Let yourself have true self-awareness for what and who you are. Honest perspective. True perspective about what's going on and why things feel difficult, and the answer not being that something's wrong with you or that you're not doing something enough. And when you take that off the table, what answers emerge? What other questions do you ask? What other paths, strategies present themselves as a way to still get what you want, but looking at things with a different perspective? And that creates opportunities for crazy change, for so much more ease, and for you ultimately to like get what you want and to feel better. So that's what I wanted to share with you guys today, on that sort of self-critical, self-shaming kind of energy, and how I feel like we can get to a place that is much more balanced and true when looking at self-awareness and trying to kind of be like accountable to coming back to that place and being in our integrity and finding motivation to create positive change in our life, because that's something that has had a huge impact on me, and that really changes the game for even my one-on-one clients who come and work in that container with me. So I hope this was helpful to you today. Remember, I am opening my group coaching program very soon. So check out my website, healingwithbree.net, or the link in the show description to get on the wait list for that. My spots in my one-on-one container are full, but I really like having different options to where you can still get that sort of customized coaching experience, where we do get on Zoom calls, where you can talk things through with me, and there's content that helps you learn the tools and the skills that will make an impact on your whole life. Doing that in a group setting where we're also building community. It's so juicy. Please sign up for that. I'm feeling like that's probably going to either launch or start in April. Maybe launch in April, start in May, start in June. It's going to be around that timeline. That's what I'm sensing about it. So make sure you check it out, sign up for that, so you can not only get these kinds of breakthroughs, but you can get customized support for what that means for you. Love you all so much, and I'll see you next week for more breakthroughs. Bye. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Breakthroughs with Brie. But before you go, please take a moment to either rate and review the podcast on whatever platform you're listening to it, or share this episode or maybe one of your other favorites with friends or loved ones that you think might enjoy or benefit from this content. Both of those things help more than you know, so that I can keep creating these episodes to help us all have more breakthroughs. Remember, you can connect with me on social media, sign up for my email list, hear what products, services, or events that I'm currently offering, all in the link in the show description or by visiting my website, healingwithbrie.net. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for your support and for the time that you're taking to heal yourself and align more with your beautiful soul, as it helps us all so much more than you realize. I'll see you all next week for more breakthroughs.